Hello? Hi, I can't hear you. I don't have the audio.
How's that?
Oh, there we
Is
go.
that better?
Okay.
Good. Okay, cool.
Am I the only one?
Well, so far. Hopefully we've got a
Oh
few
my
more.
goodness.
Hopefully we've got a few more dropping in too, but
Okay.
that's the plan
Well,
anyway.
great.
Yeah,
That,
yeah, good to meet you.
nice to meet you too.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
Here we go. Here's
Well,
one.
I had been interested in the women's retreat. I mean, I had looked at the. Oh, here comes somebody.
Nice.
Anyway, had looked
Cool.
at the women's retreat, and then Zanny had reconnected to you. So this is great.
Perfect.
I'll mute.
Jordy,
How are
it's
you?
not Molly.
No, it's not. That's my wife. I gotta change the name quick.
Yeah, no, you're
She
fine.
uses the computer all the time for work, so I'm on a different one. So I'll get you guys all squared away. So
Nice. There you go.
I'll put my last name too. That makes the
Okay. Nice. And Lisa, hey.
How's it
Cool.
going?
Not too bad. How are you?
Pretty good, thanks.
Good. Well, I think this is our crew for tonight. So thank you so much for being here and for diving in this platform and in this way. And I thought just to kind of get going, I can just open us in a word of prayer. We can just do real brief kind of introductions, and then we can talk a little bit, both formally and informally, about this whole what it means to be a Lutheran thing, um, and how our faith impacts our life, and try to unpack that a little bit together. Does that sound good?
Mhm.
All right, let's have a word of prayer and then we'll get going. Good and loving God, thank you so much for gathering us today. Thank you for the sun reflecting off of the snow and just hopefully a last heave before we move heavily into spring. God, thank you for the ways that you continue to build and form and cultivate and nourish community. And God, we thank you for your church and the ways that we steward our relationships. We steward community. We learn and we grow. We meet new folks and try to catch glimpses of the ways that you are at work in the world. Thank you for each one here tonight and for uh, both the days that they've had and this opportunity to learn together and the chance to learn a little bit about what we're up to at Trinity right now, and what you're up to through us. God, be with us throughout this meeting and be with all those in need this day. We pray in your name. Amen. Well, I'm Pastor Peter. I am one of the pastors at Trinity. I've been at the church about 3 years, and just a little longer after my colleague Pastor Chris, um, and then we also have kind of a part-time visitation pastor as well, and then a number of different staff folks who help us do ministry together. But it's been a really great church to be a part of, and I feel like I've learned and grown a lot. This is my second church that I've served, and I'm just really grateful for the community and the kinds of questions that we ask together, the kind of worship that we're a part of. I think the mission that we stand for, and just really being, really trying to be um, somewhat of a little image of Jesus in the St. Croix Valley. Um, and I think I hope that's what y'all have caught a little bit of too so far, and that's kind of why you're here. But I do have I've got a married partner, Ashley, two little girls who are 7 and 5 as well. So we've had a very busy pandemic, both homeschooling and trying to both work full time and trying to keep it all balanced and together and afloat. Um, and also just enjoy each other's time a lot too. So And not to get too frustrated for them asking for the 15th snack of the day. But those are my, that's just a little bit about me. Anybody else want to jump? Yeah, go for it. Don't all unmute yourselves at once. That can be one of the that's like a digital Lutheranism. Don't all unmute yourselves at once. Okay, sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I could share. I feel like I'm in an interesting position because I've been floating around the Trinity community for like over a year, but with the pandemic, things just got sort of interrupted. So my name is Lisa. I am a math teacher at Egan High School, and I moved up to Minnesota in the summer of 2019, so a year and a half, and landed at Trinity a few months later, kind of unofficially. And then right around the time the pandemic started, I like officially signed on. And this is, kind of my attempt to jump back in, if I'm being honest, since worship has gone mostly digital. I haven't been the best at holding myself accountable to watching worship or even going to the drive-in. So this is kind of my fresh page maybe at jumping back in.
So I think the last time I did this presentation was March 7th of 2020, which was the last time we had in-person worship. And that was the last, and I think you were there. There was a bunch of other folks too, but yeah, well, it's great to have you, and great. Thank you for sticking to the journey through this too, because man, I can't imagine why you wouldn't want to keep on going to Zoom worship when you've been teaching lots of remote all week. And yeah.
I'm Jory. My wife and I, Molly, and we got a little new baby, Hudson, that was born last August. So he's a little pandemic boy. And we recently moved to Stillwater January of last year. So just crossed the cities, and we started going to in-person worship on the day that there was the last day that you're talking about. It's March 7th. So we're like, oh, let's get to know everybody and do a couple elbow bumps because it was just starting to get going. And then we're like, we're all done. So that was fun. So we tried we've been doing the drive-in worship throughout the summer and in the fall, and when it was and the weather was good for all of us being in there. So but obviously now we're hopefully trying to do a better job of, like you said, joining on the digital stuff. And my wife did the strength class last weekend, so she got to know a couple of other folks, and Zanny, and I believe maybe a small group. Anyways, so she grew up in the Lutheran church. I grew up non-denominational, but we still had religion in our life. So but I grew up down in Hastings, so I'm familiar with the River Valley. We did a lot of activities on the St. Croix growing up. We'd swim all the time at Prescott. So it still feels like home, but just a little farther north. So, but yeah, we're doing good. We've been embracing the quarantine pretty hard the past year. So we are both working at home still, and our childcare is actually our neighbor that we've made friends with, and she and her husband are our age, and my wife and her husband work together. So it's kind of a small world that we ended up living next to them. So we actually gained some friends in the process. So it's been a nice thing. So, but yeah.
Could I just ask what kind of work, Jory, what do you in?
Oh yeah, I work for a design build company. So we're in the residential construction industry, but I actually do marketing. So been there for about 8 years, and we're down in Edina, so I'm actually glad that there hasn't been a commute, because it's a bit of a long one.
Yeah, that's a way better commute.
So it's worked out, but that's what I do. So
yeah. And what about Molly? Sorry, I didn't.
She works downtown Minneapolis, so she's happy that it's at home too, but she's a health coach. So she
cool.
She works with people all over the world, and primarily all over the US, and doing telephone coaching and things like that with people. So
cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Thanks.
Well, hello, I'm Jane, and I live in Afton. And as you can see, I have a black cat. So I have a Siamese cat too. So just as George was saying, I love this St. Croix River Valley. And this past year, I've been remote teaching. I teach Spanish at University of St. Thomas, and been all online. So Lisa, you know how that is as well. So I actually have not been at a service at Trinity Lutheran, but I had been intending to attend services at Trinity because I had, visited the website. I often go to Stillwater. I love Stillwater. I'm not far away. And I'm contemplating, it's not too far from now when I'll start to think about retirement, and I keep thinking I probably will be relocating from Afton at some point when I finish up teaching. And I love Stillwater. I love the library next door to Trinity. And I know it's got to be a wonderful church and a welcoming community, because when I have passed by on a Sunday going into Stillwater, I have seen the loveliest people going to and from the church, and the parking lot packed. And so I guess at this point, I'm really looking to join a community and be of service. I noticed there are service opportunities, and hey, I'm over 55, and I see that there was even an over 55 club. So I'm looking to connect with other people in faith and contribute. So I haven't attended a service yet, but I had registered for the women's retreat, which was held last weekend, which I was absolutely, fascinated by and looking to participate. So I think there are so many ways that to connect, to be of service, and to engage with fellow Christians. I've also been a Lutheran. My husband was a Catholic, but I have been away from the church for a few years now. Although whenever I go visit my sister in Eau Claire, I go back to the original church where I attended for many years, Grace Lutheran Church in Eau Claire. So I'm a Lutheran, but I need to go back to church.
That's
that.
That is I think it's both such an interesting time to be hunting and church looking right now as well. But I think there's a lot of folks who are, I think, definitely thinking in those lines again right now too. And really thankful that you found us, and that, gosh, the most amazing people in the valley. That's walking by. That's pretty sweet. I love that. Well, I've got just a couple of slides and stuff to go through with you, and we can kind of be as formal or informal as you want, but just want to share a little bit about kind of some of my takes on what it means to be a Lutheran. I've also been let me see if I can get this. Get this rolling here. Does that look good? This is actually up in Holden Village. Has anybody heard of Holden Village? That's yeah, you guys, yeah. Have you been? Has anybody been there? Not yet. Holden Village is like the some people call it the Taj Mahal of the Lutheran world. It really is this amazing spiritual oasis in the mountains of Washington. I was just out there a couple of years ago, just with a group of other pastor friends, but have talked to that 55 plus solo group too about it, about making that was also like, I think that was maybe January of 2020 that we were talking about that too. But I grew up in the Lutheran church. My dad was actually a Lutheran ELCA pastor. I kind of, I remember kind of running around the library at Luther Seminary as a kid. Never ever wanted to be a pastor. Never thought it would ever be in my future. But for some reason, this the questions that Lutherans ask, the kind of paradox that Lutherans get into, really intrigues me, and it always has. And I think this question, what's a Lutheran, is kind of a it's a complicated question, and that's one of my first things. Like, what comes to mind when you think Lutheran for you all?
I think something that that Molly and I always talk about is the overarching theme of grace, and
Yep.
always kind of looking to allow people to have grace and giving them, second chances, opportunities, things like that. So that's always something that comes to mind. Then obviously from a traditional stereotype funny standpoint, the lutefisk.
Yeah.
So, one serious, one funny. So.
Which that Trinity has like one of the most lauded lutefisk dinners in the world.
I did not know that. It must be from the old basement or something.
I did
You have
not
not been
know
down there yet,
that. I
Jory.
did not know that.
You did not. It's the whole place reeks for like a week. You just you can't breathe with, but but the meatballs are really good. But yeah, I do think that we'll see. I don't know if we'll see if lutefisk comes back from the pandemic, but it's been one of the, there's like 1,000 people that come and eat that lutefisk and have for 60 years. It's crazy. But those are both good. Grace is, I really appreciate that comment too, Joy, just about the importance, the perennial idea and way of life of grace, and that being so prominent as Lutherans. Yeah, it's good. By grace we are saved. What else comes to mind?
Well, for me, I having been raised in the Lutheran Church and came from a very, very Lutheran family. My grandparents, my grandmother was a church organist for many years, and my grandfather, the janitor in their Lutheran church, and where many a lutefisk dinner was held. I have this cultural tradition. But of course, to have those things happen, you have to have this community of faith and support and people helping other people joyfully, happily. So that's what I think of as well. When I think of Lutheranism, I think of people coming together in grace, as Joyce says, and engaging and welcoming one another and working together and being there for one another as well.
And eating together,
eating together.
I think that's, both of you are bringing that up too, which is a really important piece. It's just the centrality of the table too. That I think this both table of eating together and sharing and being in community together, and also just this deep vulnerability that we have in those moments. It's good. But definitely, you've got some deep family connections, Jane, too, which, there's kind of with lutefisk too, there's some traditionalism that goes with being Lutheran too, that you're kind of naming it just about, and that's my family as well, that there's something kind of in the institution of being Lutheran that's passed down, and that people pass down their faith and what they believe and where they invest their time and energy. Yeah, good. Other things?
I was going to say, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, so I would not say that lutefisk was a huge part of my Lutheranism as a kid, but up here, to each their own.
Right.
I would say what I think of, in addition, I thought of grace at first as well. And then a big part of my kind of confirmation was learning about Luther himself and the 95 Theses and Reformation and that kind of thing. So that's kind of where my brain goes.
Yeah, that's really good. And just kind of the story of what it means to be Lutheran in that kind of, and I think that really is descriptive of context, wherever that context is, and yours being probably very different than what kind of Scandinavian Swedish Lutheranism of this part of the Midwest, which is even different than the Chicago part of the Midwest.
Eating together in general definitely still
Still
applies, just not
still-
lutefisk.
Yeah, that's that's a universal. That is a universal. Well, I just did some kind of wide variety pieces too of what it means to be Lutheran. Um, I think you're right. The diversity, Lisa, is really profound. And the in the middle there you see kind of some of the breakdown of different synod bodies and prior church organizations and structures that led to kind of where we're at today. On the very bottom where the arrows are still going, hopefully we're still in the arrows part of it. I think we're still moving as the Lutheran Church, but that 1988, 1987, that's the merger of when the ELCA was created. But you have a bunch of other smaller, both mostly, Jane, you know, linguistic traditions in the church. What was Eau Claire, Grace Lutheran? What language were those? What ethnic background?
Yeah, I have to, there were two fundamental Lutheran churches founded, in the, I suppose, late 1890s or early turn of the century. And one had the Norwegian language service, and the other, Grace Lutheran, I believe that I was a member of, my family was a member of for many years. I believe that was the first English church, but I don't know. I mean, I would hate to say first one way or the other, but one church clearly in the early 20th century was still Norwegian language, and then the other one was in English. But if I had to take a quiz on which one was which, I would fail. So
no, thankfully there's grace and there are no quizzes along this presentation. No, I think those are kind of interesting intersections for me, and kind of wrestling with identity and who we are, and those churches making making some kind of compromises to come together, to be a broader tent together. And there's gain in that, and there's strength in that, and there's also loss and death in that too, of what gets left behind. Lutefisk and that kind of piece is kind of somewhat hanging on to some of the roots of our of not just our faith, but the people who shared the faith with us. And I think that can really happen in a variety of different ways, and has happened, as I think our history shows. But that fundamentally kind of that those remnants or those pieces, I think are still ways I think is important to celebrate, and to celebrate kind of the wrestling of what it means, and how we kind of share this message continually with whatever context we're in. And the one on the bottom left with the elephants, that's more of your Tanzanian, one of the largest growing Lutheran parts of the world right now, where their backyards and their their food and language are still they're still very rich in their ethnic and contextual tradition, still Lutheran, still loving this idea of grace and how God gets involved in humanity in a loving and caring way. But it's just very different. It looks very different. It feels very different. I was in Tanzania in 2019, and it's incredible. It's incredible to see the diversity of what and how God speaks through different traditions and different ideas and different people. you know, the one of the other ones too was, you know, that the front row of the church is always always empty. That does tend to be pretty true for Trinity. So you do want to get there early, Jane, when you when you do check out in-person worship, when we're back in person again. Um, it's, you know, there are just some things that are both funny and quirky about every community and every tradition, and I think those things are always in flux and always changing too. um the picture in the bottom right is from the 2019 churchwide ELCA, the ELCA churchwide assembly, where they celebrated the 50-year ordination of women in the church. They also celebrated the 40-year anniversary of the first African-American woman to serve in the church. And then they also celebrated the 10 years of the inclusion of the LGBTQ community as full ordained members of the church. And I think was, you know, it was, yeah, like a really raucous party event where I think really is celebrating a lot that of the variety of people who God uplifts, God calls, God invites and into ministry in a variety of different ways and contexts. And I think, you know, for a dad who's, you know, growing up with two girls, that was a big part of me coming to Trinity too, was to have my girls see someone else in leadership that looked different, that sounded different, that had a little different flair of what being Lutheran is. And I'll just, Pastor Chris is probably one of the most flair of people that I would have wanted my girls to get to be pastored by as well. So yeah, I'm really thankful and for that. Anything else on here about what it means to be Lutheran, kind of in these somewhat humorous or other, anything else come to mind for you all as you're looking at this? But I think yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
I was just gonna say, I shared this in this class a year ago, but I grew up Lutheran Missouri Synod, and
Yeah.
it's interesting, and part of why I love ELCA and Trinity is that picture of celebrating women and LGBTQ folks shows up, because that was not part of my experience of being a Lutheran, and that's part of kind of why I wanted to seek out ELCA as opposed to the specific brand of Lutheranism that I grew up in, because that bothers me, and so it just makes me really happy that can be and is part of Lutheranism.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that one of the things that I really appreciate about the ELCA is its attention to process, in that you know, that these are the ways in which people were invited into conversation, that congregations were invited to really wrestle with those pieces, um, and given really the chance to kind of be the broader church, and ultimately to listen to God, ultimately to see other human beings as being just as gifted and created in God's image as anybody else is. And thankfully our tradition really backs that up. And there are the ways in which we've been kind of founded from the very beginning, I think, really goes back to that wrestling and that struggle, and that the continued move towards expansive love and justice. I'm gonna I'll just point you to this. There is a really cool kind of We Are Lutheran video that's out there. If you want to go a little bit deeper, you can find that on YouTube, and I can send you these slides too, just so that you have them. But it's basically saying very similar things that we are. But that what it means to be a Lutheran is both diverse and particular, and also connected to a particular way of looking at the world that has a history and that has a story, and I think a pretty cool story as well. So I did want to just take a moment to talk and to talk a little bit about the kind of beginning of the Protestant Reformation and what happened. And Lisa, you could probably do your spiel on the awesome things that Luther did and how his time impacted what the future of the church would look like, continues to look like today in so many ways. But there are some big events that are happening in the world that really fuel the Protestant Reformation. And some people would argue that there are these kind of 500-year growth developments in the life of human evolution, humankind, that are happening in kind of large 500-year increments. We can kind of get into all the speculation of that if you want. I've had some good conversations with my spiritual director about it, but I think there are certain times in our history that call for rapid change and rapid development and rapid transition of kind of society as we know it. And Luther was definitely part of that in the 1500s, and benefited tremendously from the Gutenberg printing press that created a media distribution avenue that really allowed this message of justification by grace, of being able to speak truth to power in a way that just wasn't really happening before that, and engaging in real serious discourse that was just, it wasn't possible. That, and really this development led to having the Bible translated into the vernacular of the German people, which allowed them to have control again of their faith, which had been really taken away from them, and unfortunately manipulated in some ways that kept people impoverished, that kept people as inconsequential in the power levers of society. And so Luther really kind of births this a different way of looking at the world, going back to scripture, going back to the core elements of faith, really trying to simplify some of the kind of mental and theological gymnastics that the Catholic Church is doing to kind of boost its significant wealth and war chest. The thing that really sets Luther off is that they are taking money from widows and the poor and building the most elite, prestigious cathedral in the world in St. Peter's in Rome. And he's like, I'm not having it. This is not going to happen. And he goes, I would say he goes a little crazy, going to bat for the people of Germany, going to bat for the poor in his community, because he sees it as a distortion of the gospel. Now that's Jory. Do they talk about that in the non-denominational tradition? Have you got? And I think it's
aside from just the gold. We grew up with the golden rule, and that was essentially, that, I guess, right? Treating others as you would unto you. So
yeah. No, I'm mostly just joking, but I think it's a really profound thing that, especially as we're in chaotic and turbulent moments, that we go back to kind of similar moments when there was turbulence too, and to see what people did. And Luther went to the core stuff. He went to I would say the platinum rule, which, or the golden rule, that our core responsibility as people of faith is to love God and to love our neighbor, and everything boils down to that, and that everything really in a life of active faith comes back to those kind of those two things, which are not independent of each other, but actually interconnected all the time. That we love God by loving our neighbor, and we love our neighbor in loving God, and that it's this constant back and forth of those. But I think Luther and some of his writing and work, and I think as we've been going through the last 15 or 20 years, his stuff feels more relevant than ever in a lot of ways. And I think the kinds of really attending to your own spiritual life and journey, as well as, finding opportunities to build relationships and build community for the sake of the world are really profound. Any other questions, thoughts on that? Do you want more of a history? I can do more of a breakdown of, I can talk the 95 Theses too. If you want to know a little bit more about those things, I can, but there's some big pieces of writing that Luther does. One of them is the 95 Theses, which is essentially his issues with the Catholic Church, where he feels that things have gone astray and awry. And calls out the folks in power to think differently about it. He didn't want it to end in a schism of the church, but he and others of his ilk thought that there was significant repair that needed to be done to move forward. And ultimately that meant that he would be excommunicated for what he said. The other two big pieces of writing, and I'll kind of go into a little bit. One is the Small Catechism, which Luther kind of does in his ministry, does an analysis of some of the churches kind of in his community in and around the kind of Wittenberg and the surrounding countryside, and he feels that people don't really know what it means to be a Christian. And so he writes this really thin, and I have a picture of it too, but man, where is my, this is not my typical office. So I don't have my little, you might, yeah, Lisa, do you have one? Nice. So, I mean, it's really short. It goes into like the real basic stuff of the faith. And each of one of the things that he keeps going back to, which is this great grace-filled Lutheran question is what does this mean? Was ist das? What does this mean? And he breaks down kind of the 10 Commandments, the Apostles' Creed, the 10 Commandments, the Apostles' Creed, Lord's Prayer, and the Lord's Prayer, and goes really into depth. Like, this is really all you need. It says it all. A lot of these things are going to give you everything you need to know about what it means to be a Christian. And he really writes it not even so much. This is kind of the beautiful thing about it too. He writes it not even so much for the pastors, but he writes it for the families to do themselves. And he thinks everything should go through the life of the people. Everything should flow. This is where he's going to get the priesthood of all believers, that really all of us being called and baptized and grown into the faith have everything we need to live out what it means to be a follower of Jesus. Really egalitarian, really flat hierarchical structure. And there are literally volumes and volumes and volumes of literature on what this time period meant for and how we live today. But I think it's really crazy and big. So there's this thing about Luther that he kind of, what I like to say is Luther doesn't like to get caught in the ditch of one side or the other. That's not to say that he doesn't have kind of stakes that he puts down in the ground, but he comes up with a lot of these kind of these things that live in tension with each other, like that there's kind of law and that there's gospel, that there's both good news and that there's this call to live a life of love and service, that there's that there are kind of the ways in which we govern ourselves and the ways in which kind of God governs us. And those are two kingdoms that exist all the time. I'm trying to remember my other paradoxes. That we are simultaneously saint and simultaneously sinner all the time, bound up, inseparable parts of who we are as people of God, both totally loved and cared for, saved forever and eternal, and also bound up in the systems and complicity of what it means to be a human being living in relationship, which unfortunately what Luther would say is that is that sin causes us to be selfish, and that we are curved in on ourselves. Those are two things that exist simultaneously, that we are loved, cared for, brought into the embrace of God, and also rebellious at the same time. Does that make sense? That kind of proclivity for paradox. That's one of those things that I think the deeper you go down that rabbit hole is what makes, I think, the ELCA its coolest and its most unique and curious church. Is that there are lots of ways. This is kind of the idea too of being both a citizen of heaven and a citizen of the world. And what does that mean? How does your faith impact the ways in which you vote and you purchase things at the grocery store and care for your newborn? How does the faith and teach your students? That all of these pieces that we are both completely set free and also committed to the life of the world. This is, probably one of his best quotes. There's lots of them, but Luther said, even if I were to die tomorrow, I would plant a tree today. Even if I were to die tomorrow, if the world would end tomorrow, I would still plant a tree today. And I think there's just some profound paradox in that kind of thinking, and I think it's a really cool way to think about the world. Any questions about that? That's where it gets really deep. If you want to come to Adult Faith Forum on this, I think that's some of the it's the paradoxical stuff that people really get hungry for. Okay, we're almost done, I promise. This is kind of the new edition of the Luther Small Catechism, which we already talked about. Again, really written for families, written for the church. Wasn't written for confirmation, actually, which is what we turned it into. And unfortunately, is still there's still lots of that we're trying to detangle from that system. And also make sure that we're not losing or leaving out people who are not necessarily feeling equipped to do that work just on their own. And so that's a lot of what we do in faith formation, is kind of partner with families to be the pastors of their homes. Whatever that looks like, whatever that home looks like, you be the pastor of your home, wherever that is. And trying to give people the tools, the resources, the nourishment that they need to be, I would say, kind of little Christs in their own home and at their own tables. What does this mean for us today? I really like the sense of kind of the church is always reforming, that wherever the church gets called and formed and is developing, it's always being reformed too by the people who come to make it what it is. And that's actually my favorite part about being involved in like newcomer and new member stuff or new visitor stuff, is really that the church, thanks be to God, is always finding new ways to bring people together. And find new ways to use your gifts. That's kind of the why we've done the strengths finder work, is to really try to equip people to use their gifts in a variety of ways that God gifts us, and the unique, authentic, beloved gifts that you bring to community. And I think that gets reflected in our mission. That gets, ministry is always personal. We've been really kind of on this journey right now around housing at Trinity, and wondering with a lot of partners and other folks that have gotten really, really, I think, kind of Lutheran upset, good Lutheran, real good Lutheran righteous anger about the fact that there is not enough shelter for people even living in Stillwater, Minnesota, and that there are too many people on the street, that there are too many people without adequate resources to find affordable housing and ways to get ways to kind of make steps in a different direction. And there, it's all personal. Most of the folks who are leading that are just, members of Trinity who said, this is absurd that there is not a shelter within Washington County for, for singles without families. And what can we do differently about that? And what is the church's voice? What is the church called to in the midst of this? How do we adapt? How do we continue to build the kind of communities that God dreams for us while we're, while we're on this side of heaven? I think for me, the most kind of biggest takeaway that Luther, and I think lots of his predecessors follow, is this model, what he sees as this ongoing experience of death and resurrection in life, of going through experiences and continually finding both what gives life and what takes life. Chris's sermon actually this morning was really all about this idea of what it means to take up your cross and follow after Jesus, which is not just to say that that God wills our life for liberation, that God wills our life for beloved community, that God wills our life for justice and peace and unity. That God doesn't will our life for the experiences of death, but there are some places in which things need to die and be reborn. And I think the pandemic is giving us a lot of pause on that, and a lot of deep reflection as well as we move through this phase of of what God is up to in 2021 and the church moving forward. Okay, that's a lot about what it means to be a Lutheran in my humble. I do fully endorse all of the opinions that I've just put forth for you, and I stand. I love this church, and I love what it means to continue to look for what it is to come. But would love any questions or things that you've got on your mind and heart too. If it was helpful, what was helpful? Could you pass the quiz now, Jane? You think?
I don't know, but it's been a wonderful session with you, Pastor Peter, and I was so pleased to meet Jory and Lisa too. And yes, I just know that Trinity is a wonderful community. I can tell from just the hour that we've spent. So I just wanted to thank you, and I was really glad to meet you, Jory and Lisa, along with Pastor Peter. And I have to get the enlarged print edition of the Catechism because I don't have a copy of the Catechism, and I know the enlarged print version was meant for me. So
there's a digital version now too that you could probably blow up on your
screen. There we go. I think I need to do some reviewing. Yes. So yeah.
No,
I was glad to see Lisa had her copy, but I'm going to read it. I am. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks. And we've done some, especially around the 500th anniversary, we did some revisiting of a lot of those documents too. But they're good. They're really good. I'd love to talk more about that too.
Not that it would be a bad thing to always have a catechism on me, but I just happen to be next to my bookshelf. I don't always have it within arm's reach for the record, but
just got one in your bag, in your work, right next to your the math worksheets. And
yeah. Well, I was just going to say, echoing what Lisa had said earlier about the inclusivity of the church as well. I mean, that's also very much an attraction. my family church, the one that I attended for many years, was really torn. And there was an effective divorce within the communities, with half the congregation, more than half, staying, but the others leaving, with the lead pastor at the time in the 1980s. So
over women, over ordination of women, over the ordination of women.
no ordination of
The LGBT.
well, LGBT. Yeah,
sure.
that was the issue. It tore up the community. So people who had known each other for 40 years as churchgoers were suddenly, had different allegiances. And it was a hard time that the community went through. And that church is smaller in population now than it was prior to. But anyway, yeah, a place for all is an important thing for me too. So thanks.
No, thank you. I think that's another, the wrestling piece of the tradition too, of being able to have difficult conversations, of respectful conversations, of hopefully conversations with dignity. That's been, it's not like the potential issues that would polarize us are going away quickly. And so to be able to have, wrestle with stuff and have challenging discourse, but I think that's been one of the themes that we've kept on talking about for this next year, is really this idea, the most important thing being to stay at the table. Stay at the table with people you love, stay at the table with your faith community, stay at the table, which, when we've been so separate and so apart, that's my hope and prayer, is that it's going to be just a jubilee of renewed kind of attention to the table again. Which is really where the catechism is, like, that's what Luther is like. He's building it for around tables, around family tables at dinner time. Yeah. What's your cat's name, Jane, too? What's your the black one is beautiful. Yeah.
Charlie.
Charlie?
Charlie is his name. Yeah.
Sweet.
He came named that way from the Humane Association. He's a very happy cat.
Charlie. Anything else? Well, I can release you. Thank you so much for taking the time, though, y'all, and really appreciate getting to know you just a little bit. I know Zany would love to hear from you too, and if there's anything we can do, if we can get you a large catechism, if we can get you, Jory, are you guys thinking about baptism?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Anything we can do?
Yeah. I think
we'd love to plug you in.
Yeah, we've talked about how and when and how to do it appropriately right now.
We did do one today. We did one today at just following the service. So we got all of our staff out of there, and then we brought the rest of the baptism family in, and it can be done, but there are, and there's no reason not to wait either.
Right.
To gather when we actually really can be in person. We're out at the drive-in. That's always yeah. It's there's lots of good options though. Yeah. Cool.
Congratulations on your little son.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Sorry.
You
So
guys
how old is he? 6 months?
Yeah, he just turned 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah.
He is hilarious. He laughs all the time. We've got other friends that have kids too, and some of them are kind of very serious, and just anything. We have a dog too. Anytime the dog comes in the room, he's just laughing. So I feel like our families have gotten so many videos already, because when he started laughing at like 2 months old, and now he's just these big gut laughs and everything. So he's awesome. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Is he like pulling up on stuff? What's he doing?
He's trying to. Yeah, he's just starting to crawl. So we did a big baby proof today, and I'm sure it's going to continue for the next. It's going to be ongoing.
Oh, it's so fun though to see them start to kind of those little, which you get to experience.
Bottom teeth. So he's got like the reverse.
Oh, he does.
He's got like the reverse beaver going on. He's got 2 bottom teeth.
Yeah, sweet. Little chomp. You got to have something to start chomping up.
Right. Yeah.
Chomping up some food. It's good. Cool. All right. Well, blessings, everyone. Yeah, just hope you have a wonderful night and God's peace and love to you.
Thank you. It was lovely to meet you all.
All right. Take care.